Welcome, everybody. We'll give everybody maybe another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Let me introduce to you guys Rebecca Brizi. She is a business consultant, and she is the way I like to describe her. I'm going to give a personal introduction because I happen to know Rebecca very well. I can read off her bio and tell you she's a author of a wonderful book called Phrases for Business Success. She can speak like 5 different languages, has lived in several different places in the world, and holds 2 different citizenships, and she comes to us from the corporate world, and she brings all that wonderful experience. I can read through the bio, but what I can tell you is from personal experience, she is her language and her words are impeccable, and she takes that to business success. It's incredible what she does, and I think we've got a real treat for all of you guys today. So enough from me. I want to give Rebecca the most time that I can. So I give you guys Rebecca Brizi. She's going to talk to you guys about measuring what matters and KPI success. So without further ado.
Thank you so much, Neely. And thank you for that lovely introduction. That's even more on my toes now and thinking a lot about the words that I use. But welcome, everybody. We're going to talk about measuring what matters, how to build KPIs. We are going to work through some of this. So what I want you to take away from today are practical tips. It's mid-October. We just started Q4, pardon me, practical tips for building up KPIs for the new year. So at the end of today, you'll have, really functional approach that you can take. But that also means that I will occasionally open it up or call on you, not anybody specifically, but allow you the opportunity to participate. So do a couple of things. Feel free to speak, and also feel free to interrupt me. If you have a question or a comment, by all means, make that one it's relevant. So keep your cursor close to your unmute button so you can just quickly unmute yourself and make it handy. If you prefer to use the reactions that are available in Zoom, do that. So just raise your hand, put anything in there, put in a party hat. If you're reacting to something, then we'll know that you're trying to get our attention. So please do feel free at any point in time to do that. Let me go into our screen share. All right, so jazz hands real quick. Everybody seeing my presentation? So KPIs and measuring the things that matter. And as I say, because I want you all to come out of today with some active steps that you can take, I really want you to go through today's presentation, the next 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, thinking about this in the context of your own business. Typical KPIs range from things that are very numerical and specific, things like revenue generation or profit margins or billable hours, to broader category type things like customer satisfaction or productivity or employee happiness. And some of you are tracking your KPIs very diligently and with dashboards. Some of you are tracking your KPIs very casually, and some of you maybe are not tracking them at all. That's normal, especially in the small business world or solo world. There's a broad range of what we think of in terms of measurement. But I would like to start by getting into that mind frame and getting an understanding of how you approach this now. So could anybody at all, if you're comfortable, please share what is a KPI for you, and what is the purpose of a KPI and how you're using it or would like to use it in your own firm, in your own practice?
So I'll get things started. I usually track the number of clients per practice area. It's helpful to know which practice area is generating what percentage of my revenue.
Nice. And why is it helpful to know that? What do you do with that information?
It can help from a marketing perspective. It's just good information to know, and from kind of planning for the next year.
Yes, terrific. So it's telling you how you've performed, but it's also telling you this is what's working. So it gives you something to do tomorrow as well as seeing what you did yesterday. Yeah, that's tremendous. Anybody else? Does anybody else want to share something that you track right now, or as I say, that you would like to track for a similar reason or other reason?
In my consultation form, I track like whether how the client or prospective client found out about me. So whether it was the directory or attorney referral or client referral. So at least I know, what source of my referrals are coming from, and then also whether or not the advertisement is working. So that's a good way of sort of indicating where my clients are located and how they find me.
Yeah. And so probably a similar outcome, because then you can use that information to say this ad is working, this one is not, this is in the right place. So it also tells you, again, what you can do tomorrow, not just what happened yesterday. So, and that's perfect. That is exactly what a KPI is. Remember that it stands for Key Performance Indicator. It needs to indicate something, right? It needs to indicate something that can or will or is going to happen. So when I think of KPIs, the way that I put it in my head to make sure that I stay focused on functional KPIs, on having KPIs that I can use to tell the stories, is that I think of it this way, that KPIs are not about counting things, but it's about how do I measure value. And everything that happens in my business has to have a point of value. And because if not, what is it doing there? And value is entirely subjective. Value is what is valuable to my business. Working on KPIs, I always end up thinking about the very first time that my husband tried to make focaccia bread using his mother's recipe. So she makes tremendous focaccia. She gave us the recipe. We followed it to the letter. We measured everything perfectly. The timing was exactly what she said. And the end result was a highly mediocre, not very well risen focaccia. We're sitting there saying, how is this possible? We did everything right. We did everything perfectly. But the problem is, with focaccia, what matters is the end result, right? Nobody cares if I measured the right ratio of flour to water if the end result is no good to eat. The only thing that is valuable in a focaccia is the end result of the focaccia, not everything that came before. So who cares if we measured the yeast perfectly, if the result isn't giving us the thing that we want? So what you realize is the recipe is not about correct measurements. It's not about correct timing based on what somebody else has done. The recipe is about, I want to create this perfect focaccia. I want it to have this level of moistness. I want it to be this tall or this small. I want it to be soft or harder on the bottom. In order to do that, what do I need to do in the steps previous to that, right? So in order to create that perfect focaccia, what does that mean for my flour to water ratio? How long do I have to cook it? How long do I have to let it rise? The end result dictates what I do in order to get there. So what you want to be asking yourself is, are your KPIs giving you the focaccia that you want to eat every single time? So as Neil already introduced, my name is Rebecca Gebhardt-Brizi. I do management consulting. And when I work with a business on their KPIs, what I often see is businesses go straight to things that are numerical, that are highly quantitative and easy to measure. There's nothing wrong with that in of itself. Of course, KPIs mean measurements, but they tend to look too far in the past or too solidly in the past. Now, you need to track your numbers, okay? But let your CPA do your financial reporting. Let your HR business or your software manage trackable, track your hours, etc. Anything that is simply looking backwards, which are things that you do need to have record of, is not what you should be spending your time on, because your focus as a business owner needs to be on what brings value to your business. The KPIs that you are covering need to tell you a story of value. And I'll add a quick word here about, I'm going to use the word business because you are business owners, but I know that language like this is controversial with attorneys because, of course, you all have firms, right? You don't have companies. So you are involved in the practice of law. But when you own a firm, either as a solo or if you have a small firm with colleagues and employees, you are also a business owner. You are responsible both for the practice of law and the business of law. And so when we're talking about KPIs, you're the business owner. You're not working in the firm in this moment. You're working on the firm, and that's a business perspective. So remember that you're wearing the hat right now of the business owner, and you're thinking of, what do I do? How do I know that I'm doing the right things that are bringing value to my firm, not just today, but also tomorrow and the day after? So let's start with how we recognize good KPIs. A good KPI needs to, first of all, tell a story, right? So it tells the story of success. And the examples you gave us right away, you're already thinking in this way, right? So Neely said, we're looking at which practice is bringing the most business so that she knows how to target her marketing efforts and what is working best, where she wants to put more attention and invest more. Okay. And we also, when we look at where clients are currently coming from, again, that can tell us a story of what's working, or it might even tell us, you know what, I do want more clients from this area. So why is it not working? Why am I not getting the results that I want? So the point is that they indicate something, right? Key performance indicators that will probably happen tomorrow. They should be able to tell a complete story, not just tell me things up to date, to year to date. In doing so, and with the examples we've seen, they should also allow us to look at our business and easily make corrections. And this is really difficult in a small firm or as a solo. You don't have 100 back offices and all these support areas, etc. So when something isn't working the way that you want it to, it can be very hard to hone in on that, to really highlight just that one area, because it usually is a ripple effect. And by the time you see it not working, it's actually 3-4 steps down the line. So having a good KPI that is measuring value, and again, that subjective value, what it means to you, makes it much easier to be able to go and say specifically, okay, here there's something that is not working the way I want it to. So when I make a correction, I only need to make it here. And I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And you don't risk making a correction further down the line, and that's not actually going to fix the problem. It's really hard to get that visibility when you're wearing so many hats in your business. So good KPIs also solve that problem. And finally, KPIs have to tell us both what happened before and give us that indication of what's going to happen next. So it's not just about results, it is about performance. So if indicator is a keyword, performance is also a keyword, right? These words are chosen for a reason. So it is telling us about how we are performing, not just what we've done, because our performance continues. So how we're performing today is probably how we're going to keep performing tomorrow. We don't change our habits overnight. So are we performing in the way that we want to be? So they tell us not just what happened yesterday, but what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, this is where you can start to see some specific examples. So if we look at sales, if we think of sales, and again, I know you're law firms, you don't think in terms of sales necessarily, but you are selling, right? You're converting new clients, you're collecting money from them. So if we look at the traditional business approach of looking at the performance of sales in the past, if we're just looking at results, those don't necessarily tell us anything for tomorrow, because maybe there was you had a particular referral that brought you a huge new client or numerous new clients, but that's all going to dry up tomorrow. And if you don't have the story that goes along with that, you don't know that. So when you're looking at just the number of sales, it doesn't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. It only tells you what happened yesterday. Again, important to track, but not a KPI. It's something completely different. So instead, when you should be able to look at this measurement and say, based on this measurement, based on this thing that I am tracking, I can see, for example, that I have a high level of customer loyalty. And based on that, I can expect this amount of recurring business, let's say, over the next 2 quarters. So again, this is all highly subjective. What does customer loyalty mean to you? What does recurring business look like for you? How do you recognize those things? And how do they tell the story? So let me pause there very quickly to see if there are, first of all, I'm just scrolling through, see if there are raised hands. But what are you hearing me say? Who wants to repeat back to me based on what we've said so far? Have your ideas of KPIs changed, or have you added to that in any way? How do you think of KPIs now?
I think I still would think of like a numerical value or counting as part of KPI, because they're kind of interrelated, so I think it would be hard for me to kind of switch, like what is a value that's kind of separate from just tallying, the calls that I get, or just number of inquiries that I get per month.
Yes.
But, I could have like, 10, but then have one really valuable client that, so I think it's based on if it's like a volume driven practice or you're a boutique firm that, you don't need volume, but you could have one or two cases that are pretty big, will keep you busy as if you have like 10 mini cases.
Yeah.
So I think maybe just kind of different on what the style of your law firm is, but
yeah,
I think I'm still kind of like caught on the number thing rather than like actual value.
Yeah. So and you're right. There is a number because it still is a measurement, and you have to be able to demonstrate something, right? You have to be able to look at that performance and say, okay, this is what happened. So you're absolutely right that there's still a number involved. The question is how you determine that number. And the second part of what you said is really important to that too, that value is subjective. So what the numbers that matter to one firm will not matter to another, or will have lower relevance to another. But also the story that those numbers tell might be different. So even two firms tracking the same numbers might be looking for different stories. So absolutely what you're measuring is quantitative, because otherwise you can't measure it, but it never exists in isolation. It is a story. So when you are doing your review of your key performance indicators, and again, if you're doing this on your own, if you're a solo, then by all means, sit down, have a conversation with yourself. You have to embody, let's say, both the business owner and like the CEO and the CFO, shall we say, to be able to see both sides of this. So you would not present just a list of numbers, but you would say, here is the performance that we've seen. And let me explain to you what that means. And when I'm working with a small business, when they do look at their annual results or quarterly results, depending on the business, they do it differently. That is 100% a presentation and not a memo. And it's really, that's the thing I hark on a lot about. So yes, you are bringing in numbers, but they have to tell the story. So the number itself is not enough. So if you can use the number to tell the story, then that's working. And that's what we'll look at next, is how to build these KPIs. And that's really the key, is are you measuring the things that give you value, that tell you a story of value? So let's go ahead and look at that. This is about 3 steps to build functional KPIs. This is a process for building out your KPIs, for knowing what to measure and what kinds of measurements you want to see, what sort of results you hope to see. That's valid too. And if you follow this process, then you will be building KPIs that tell you this story, that do this thing for you. So if we agree that a KPI is a measurement of value, follow this system and you will be measuring what value means to your firm specifically, as opposed to a different firm. So again, you're all unique. The things that you value are unique to you, to your firm. And yes, if you sit down with somebody else who has a similar law firm, same practice area, some of those things will overlap. But when you take the entire description of value, which is going to be multiple things, and put it all together, that's going to be unique to you. So it's not a single trait. It's the combination of traits or stories of value that make it unique to you. So the first thing you do when you want to build your KPIs, you have to start with the focaccia, right? What is it that you want to eat when you're done with this recipe? What is it that you want to see happen? What is the end result? And the way that I work on this is by describing a vision of success. This is a really simple way to get into this first step, to plan your focaccia, to know what focaccia you want to make. And this is as long as you want description of what success looks like at your firm. To do this, and literally sit down with pen and paper, there's no character limit, tell a full story, sort of describe a picture really of everything that you want to see. When you think of when this firm is working perfectly, exactly the way I want it to, this is what it looks like. And that includes things like what clients are coming to you? What clients are you working with? How much of that business is coming in versus you going out to get it? So how are those clients finding you? What are they asking you to work on? What are you spending your time doing? Beyond lawyering, right? What else are you spending your time doing? Where are your efforts going? And in this ideal world, in this vision of success, what hours are you working? Where are you working? Do you like the environment? Who are you working with? If you do have employees or colleagues or partners, what do they look like? And very importantly, if you do have employees, what do you want them to say about the workplace? What results do you want to see? What financial results do you want to see? And the really important question there is why. The financials, the revenue are never just an end unto itself, right? You need to understand, well, why is this the number? Why is this the type of money I want to be making? What does that mean to me in my life? So you're bringing in the entire vision of success for you personally and the role that your law firm is playing in that vision of success. So don't think that you have to separate out what is happening at work from the lifestyle that you want. Those two things are inseparable. So make that part of it. And describe this picture of a vision of success. So I'm going to give you an example and then see if anybody else can share just an example of something that you would put into your vision of success. But to show you how personal or minute this can get, for me, in my vision of success, I include routine. Having routine in my life is extremely important to me because when I feel that I can control my time, I'm way more productive. I'm a strong believer in not capturing things in my head, right? My brain is a factory, not a warehouse. So when I can look at my weekly schedule, for example, and know exactly where I'm going to be and really control the time in between meetings, know when I'm going to start work, when I'm going to end work, that's extremely important to me. I work better. I feel better. I also suffer migraine attacks, and being out of routine is a very common trigger for me. So that's a personal health aspect that I bring into it. But I want my job to function in a way that minimizes my migraine attacks. All of these things are connected. So when I describe my vision of success, having control over my time and my routine is in there. It's very important to me. So it's very high in my description of a vision of success. What does that make you think of? Does anybody want to share something that when you think of, and it could be similar to that, it could be the types of clients you want to work with, the types of work you want to spend your time on. What is it that you think of right away that makes you say, that's going to be in my vision of success? Neely, you raised a hand.
Yeah, no, so when I started my own practice, what you said, routines are very important to you. To me, my schedule, I came from a big law background. I didn't get home till 6:45, 7 many days. And one of the things that was very important to me was ending my workday at 4:30 so I could pick up my kids. Yeah. So that's where I kind of start, drop-offs, pickups, are my bookmarks, and everything happens within the business inside those bookends.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's an excellent example. So that's something that in of itself is not part of the work, but it's going to drive how the work happens. It has a big impact on how the work is organized. And the point is that value is also personal, right? It's in the business, but it's also for the individual. So understanding, well, how do I build a business that allows me to do this? So what needs to be in place so that I can respect this choice that I made and the reasons why I made it. So absolutely everything that matters to you in how you are running this business and how you are running this firm is relevant to your vision of success. And the KPIs that you build need to be telling the story of all those things that matter. Directly business related or indirectly business related. This might be indirectly business related, but as I say, it does affect the working conditions, the working environment. So it is still related. So that's a great example. The really put yourself into that description, into that vision, into that story. Again, the way I generally picture this in my head is describing, I think of a big painting and I'm describing it. It's not really a moment in time, but, I can almost visualize this is what the perfect day in the life at this firm should look like. And so going through that description. Now, once you have that description, terrific, you've got a vision of success. You have to get there. And things have to happen in your firm every single day in order to achieve that vision of success. So at this point, we start looking at what are those things that need to happen. And we're looking at the roles necessary in your firm. And again, as a solo, this still matters. Even if it's just you, there still are multiple roles that you're filling in. We started out by saying you're both an attorney and a business owner, so at a minimum, that's 2. Now, to do this, to think about these roles, this is again telling you what needs to happen in your firm to achieve that vision of success. I do want you to think in terms of categories rather than specific tasks. It doesn't matter if you start with the tasks, if that's the easy way to do it, but at the end, you should have, 5 categories of roles that happen, of functions that need to happen in your business. So you might say things like, well, to achieve my vision of success, there has to be client intake, right? That has to happen in a particular way. The lights have to be on, and the printer always has to have ink in it. So that's something that you might put down. Somebody has to answer the phones. Somebody has to do the lawyering part of it. So all these different things that have to happen, and even if you list them out as tasks, things like, or in minutia, things like the printer always has to have ink. Once you've got your full list, you'll be able to assemble those bullet points together into these broader roles. So maybe the person who's responsible for making sure the printer always has ink is the same person who's responsible for keeping the lights on, right? Paying the utility bills, whatever it is. So you can start to group all the jobs themselves together into these broader roles. And you want to think in terms of roles. And as I say, even if you're a solo, you have more than one role, and you need to understand that because somebody still needs to make sure that all these things are happening. So you need to understand what the necessary roles are. But this is also an opportunity to start shedding. Okay, so you can get rid of all those jobs that don't contribute to your vision of success. Maybe they're there because you came from big law and that used to exist there and you're doing it now and you realize it's not contributing. Or maybe it's there for legacy reasons, but is no longer relevant. Or maybe it's just something you can get rid of and realize it's not actually going to negatively impact your firm. So it is an opportunity to shed, to get rid of the parts that are not contributing to your vision of success. Because if they're not, then they're just not necessary. And sometimes small things are necessary, right? I always think of brushing my teeth. I don't do it for fun, but I do it because I'd rather that than have cavities. There's going to be a few things in your firm that are brushing your teeth, but they are necessary to the vision of success, because my vision of success includes avoiding the dentist as much as possible. So put together those broad categories, know what the roles are about what needs to happen, and what the performance of each of those roles needs to be. And this is where we start to get into those measurements. What needs to be happening in each of these roles for you to know that you're achieving your vision of success? How do you know that the roles are performing in a way that you can just look at their results and know that they're telling a story of success? So for example, if client intake is on there, then your measurement is not client intake needs to happen within 20 minutes. Because I suspect that the time is less important than the quality, right? There's a level of precision. If there's interaction with the client, then there's probably standards of behavior, ways of treating the client. There's a customer service expectation. There are going to be all sorts of things that are probably more important than the time. Time might also be important, depends on what your firm is, what the function is, how things work, volume, if you're a high volume, etc. So time might matter, but it never matters on its own. And that's why numbers rarely matter on their own. Because if things are happening quickly, but badly, or if things are happening quickly, but it's making your clients angry, or if things are happening quickly, but have to be corrected 8 times, then that's not contributing value. That's not bringing you to your vision of success. So when you're thinking about measurements, I want you to look at the roles and say, what am I going to see? Or what am I going to hear? Or what can I point to on paper or in my software that tells me that this role is performing the way I want it to, the way I picture it when I picture my vision of success, right? When I picture the perfect law firm that's doing everything I want it to do for me. And that's where you start to see some things that are directly quantitative. They might be there, of course, but also things that are more categories, right? So again, with client intake, if that does include interaction with the client, there's going to be that customer experience level there. How do I make sure that the person responsible for this is treating my clients with respect, or putting a smile on my client's face, or any other thing that you choose is the best indicator to you that it's being successful? So again, this is highly subjective because it depends on your description of value, on your vision of success, which is highly, highly subjective. So to summarize these 3 steps, you start with a description of success. Then you just determine what has to happen, broadly speaking, in order to achieve that vision of success. What are the roles needed in your firm? And then you say, when those roles are performing correctly, successfully, what am I seeing? What is happening? And how do I ascribe a measurement to that? So yes, the numbers will matter, but you're putting them in as a consequence of what the success value is.
Quick question, Rebecca.
Please.
So you said to think about in terms of roles rather than jobs.
Yes.
But I guess the obvious next step, once you realize that, you've got these various roles, maybe you want to delegate, you've identified certain things that you want to delegate, right? Or outsource it. How do you describe, what's the difference between a job description versus a role description? And how does that come into play with trying to delegate certain roles or jobs? Because I guess I tend to think of in terms of, this is a job that I want to outsource.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. So you're the person, as either the solo or the firm owner, you're the person that's creating all these descriptions, but that doesn't mean you're the person that needs to do all these things. Now, when you are outsourcing or delegating, how do you set somebody up for success? How do you make sure that they are doing this in a way that's going to give you those results and that performance that you want? So those KPIs will always be on point, because that's going to achieve your vision of success. Well, that's where the role precedes the job description. And in fact, when I'm working with a client, I always make sure that when they are putting job descriptions out there, whether it's to hire or it's to outsource a particular function or job, that role, that category description, and the vision of success and the KPIs, all 3 of these elements are part of that description that they share. So what you want to be able to say is, I want you to be, I'll stick with the client intake example. I want you to be in charge of customer intake. Here's what that means to me. Here's a description of that function. And that's your role. And this is why it needs to work in this way, because it needs to achieve this vision of success. And you won't share, if you've written 3 or 4 pages of your vision of success, or if you have painted a picture, however you visualize that, you won't share that whole thing. But you can summarize that down. This is usually where I can extract a mission statement or 3 core values of the firm. That's how you can extract the essence and the essentials of that vision of success. So when you are delegating or outsourcing, you say, this is the role, and I expect it, if it works in this way, to achieve this vision of success, this mission statement, or to uphold these corporate values, these firm values. And in order to do that, I would like to see these things happen. That's the KPI side. I expect to be able to point to these measurements. And so all of this plays a part. And what you're doing there is explaining to the person, not just, I expect you to fill in the form, not just, I expect you to answer the phone if you're getting a phone service, but rather, when somebody calls, you need to make sure you get all this information. You need to make sure that you are friendly, that they get off that phone call happy. You need to make sure that they know what to do next. It's the behavior, and all of that comes as a consequence of the vision of success and the roles that then describe the behavior. And so that's what you can then point to. So for example, if it were a phone service, if the person answering the phone is doing what you told them in theory, but every single customer, when you then speak to them, have no idea what's going on, then you need to be able to measure that, to say, okay, the customers after the first phone call, they don't know what's coming next. So if I am explaining something that should have been explained in the first phone call, I need to be able to track that and say, this isn't a fluke, this is happening periodically, so something back there isn't working. And I can go back to the person responsible for answering the phones and talk to them about it. So that's how all of this comes in, is it all ties in. The actual task that the person is doing, that's tiny. You can tell anybody to answer the phone, or you can tell anybody, with some technical training to do something more technical, but it's how they do it and knowing why they're doing it. What is it that they're trying to create? That's what matters. And when they know what that end goal is, then everything else makes sense. It's easier for them to wrap their head around it too, because they say, oh, okay, I can see what you mean when you say be friendly. It's because we're trying to build this reputation for this firm, and friendliness is a requirement. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Does anybody else have questions on this? Because these 3 steps are really the core of it. And it is a slightly different way to look at things very often. So please, anybody else have questions on to doing this? Or when you think about how you would describe roles, for example, do you know where to start? Does that leave you at a loss? Where do you think you would start in a process like this?
Just a quick note to the attendees. We want you guys to get the most out of this, and we want to have it a workshop style session. So please feel free to come on video. Let's have a conversation around this. I think that's going to be the best way for you guys to get value out of this.
Hey, Rebecca, I have a question. So,
yeah.
I'm an immigration attorney and I work at an immigration firm, and we have volume. So we have lots of cases. How do you get the staff or people in management to embrace the concept of KPI? Because what I tend to hear is, you're like Big Brother watching over me. What do you do? It's going to affect my bonus, my performance evaluation, all of that. So how do you get them to embrace this KPI concept?
Yeah, right. People don't rally around a number or pressure, and the number is often taken as a sense of pressure, like, oh, I have to achieve these results, etc. Nobody's going to rally around that and make that a cause, but people will rally around a mission. And so again, that's where bringing it up to this highest level of, well, what is it that we're trying to achieve? That's where you can get that buy-in and that collaboration. And if people understand what that is, how it affects them, and why it's going to affect their role in that way, why their bonus is dependent on these 3 things, for example, or this one thing, they understand why that is, then they are more likely to see it as okay, this is what we're all doing, and sort of buy into that. So again, that starting with that mission or firm values, that vision of success, understanding what we're building and why. And people at that point can say, okay, I see that. That makes sense. I want to be part of that. Now, what if they don't say that? What if they say, man, that means nothing to me? Bring your people into the creation of your vision of success. The most powerful way you can do this, and of course, this depends on the size of your firm. If it is, the bigger it is, the more you can do this just by departments or teams rather than the whole firm. But anything up to 20 people, frankly, I've seen this work with everybody involved. Have people think about what their vision of success is, right? So when we started talking about this, I said to you, what is, when you're building your vision of success, it's what that looks like for you every day. What are your working conditions? What are you spending your time doing? What is your routine? What are your hours? Where is your office? Is it a home office? Is it downtown? Is it in the country? All these things that impact your life, let your team members do that too. And if you can let your employees, your colleagues, whoever it is that's in your team, write their own vision of success and then plug that into the firm's vision of success, and then it becomes a conversation, right? So then they're allowed at that point. So you're opening the door, right, for this conversation. They are allowed at that point to come to you and say, this is my vision of success, and some things need to change for me to achieve it. And you can say, okay, well, the firm's mission. So how can let's talk about this. How can we allow these changes and not compromise where we're going as a firm? But that's how you get buy-in, really. So the more you can open this up to individual participation, and it doesn't mean that you're walking in there with a blank page. You know what the mission is, right? Like, you have to have something set, but know that then it can be influenced by other people. People will rally onto that. And again, it just means that they understand, like, oh, it's not just an arbitrary thing, or, it's just a sort of standard sales results. Everything else is secondary. It's whatever the case may be, that it actually is built around something that we're trying to achieve as a whole. So you do get more collaboration with that, because everybody knows not necessarily what everybody else is doing, but that everybody else has also bought into this vision of success. The other thing that I've seen this do is make communication in multiple directions, but also accountability in multiple directions work better. And this takes some time to get used to. And what I'm describing doesn't happen overnight, right? But with a series of like firm meetings, so getting everybody together, you do it over the course of a couple of months. It's more than one meeting. It doesn't take long to do, but it's a process rather than an event. But then you can also build up a level of comfort where I've seen people feel really comfortable holding others accountable without arguing. And sometimes it means holding somebody they report to accountable, because it makes it so much easier to say, well, is what we're doing here really focused on the mission? Does it really ascribe to the way we've described this role? Or, is it achieving these KPIs, these measurements, as opposed to having to say, I think you're doing it wrong, or, I disagree with how my boss is managing the team, or they can actually just point to this shared message that everybody's bought into. And so it makes people feel that they have a lot more control over their job and a lot less Big Brother. The flip side is, of course, it does become less Big Brother, because now you're measuring value. You're not looking at, okay, how many phone calls did you make today, right? Or, how many hours were you sitting at your desk? Nobody likes that. That's really arbitrary and really easy to game a system like that. So once you focus that shift, that measurement onto what brings value to the firm, then it by default makes the whole situation less Big Brother-ish. Let me share one more thing. So when you're thinking about how to set up these KPIs, how to think about these roles, what does it mean to contribute to your vision of success? I believe very strongly that brainstorming should never start with a blank page. So what I recommend is looking at 3 core pillars for business success. So with these 3 pillars in place, you're building a sustainable business. The pillars are the same, but much like the procedure for writing KPIs, the execution on them is highly subjective. And what those are first of all, loyal customers. What does that mean to you? So that word loyalty will mean something different to different firms. Is it recurring business? Is it referrals? Is it somebody who calls you at least once a year? I worked with a CPA firm where this description was, our clients call us before they decide anything, right? And that was something they really had to work towards, because most people don't call their CPAs before they, buy a house or do a thing. But that was to them what described loyalty. So we built in KPIs that and roles that were going to bring us to that. That was a whole change management plan. So figure out what loyal customer means to you. And to do that, what needs to be happening? Look back at those roles and say, well, how do each of these roles make sure that we are building customer loyalty? That's value. So the answer to that question is what brings value to your firm, and that's what you build your KPIs on. The second pillar is happy employees. So what is it that allows you to recognize that the people who work for you are happy to come to work, that they're having a good time, that when they're not with you, when they're out with their friends and their friends say, how's work? They're saying good things, right? They're saying, oh, I love working there. You should come work there. Everybody, you all want your employees and your colleagues to say this about your workplace. So what does that mean? How do you recognize it? How do you build that into your day-to-day practice? And then finally is business goals. And business goals, really, vision of success, same thing. So again, it's not so much about the quantitative goals, like a revenue goal or a size goal. This is about the business you're trying to build. You just need to know why you're doing the things that you're doing. What is the lifestyle? What is the firm that you want to have? And that's how you tie that into business goals. So when you can take these 3 pillars and see how they happen with each of those roles, right? Your vision of success is going to give you the description of what these 3 mean. Then based on that, you can build KPIs. And if you know that your KPIs are addressing each of these 3 pillars, then you know that you're building a balanced business. And this does bring us right back to the beginning where we were talking about quantitative measurements. The problem when you start to look at just one thing and just a number is that there's a really high risk of cannibalizing the rest of the business. So a very typical example is you've got a revenue goal. Our revenue goal is $1 million. And tomorrow you get a client that pays you $1 million. And so what, you stop working for the rest of the year? Well, no, because you're not going to get that client for $1 million next year, right? That is not telling you a story of success. So thinking of the 3 pillars, make sure that you are not just honing in on one thing that's going to risk actually harming the rest of your business, either for neglect or because it's cannibalizing what you're doing elsewhere. but actually that you're keeping a really good balance in your business of all the things that need to happen. And there's some happy tension there, right? Certain things need to happen for you to have happy employees. Other things need to happen to have loyal customers, to pursue your goals. That happy tension, and again, that conversation that you can create is what keeps these things in balance. And that's what you need to know to build your KPIs. So 3 steps for building KPIs that will tell you a story of success, that will tell you what value you're creating in your firm, and will allow you to change course if you're not building the value that you originally set out to build, if you're not making the focaccia that you want to be eating tonight at dinner. And then using those 3 pillars of loyal customers, happy employees, and business goals to make sure that you're keeping a really healthy balance in the way that you do that. And I will open it up to Q&A.
Rebecca, will you speak to, because we've got some solo practitioners here, right, who may not have employees. How should they be thinking about it? Are they thinking in terms of 2 pillars versus 3 pillars? Can you share some thoughts?
Yeah, phenomenal question. Thank you. No, 3 pillars all the time. You are your employee as well as your boss. This is, do you ever have that moment when you're like, do I give myself a raise this year? Well, I don't know. Have I been good at my job? Well, I don't know. Have I, play that role. I mean, that's what you're doing with yourself. So you are responsible for creating working conditions that you are happy with. And so when you think of happy employees, it's what makes you happy to come to work every day? What makes you look forward to your day instead of think, okay, I just have to get through today and be fine. You should never feel that way, or you should strive to never feel that way. So you still have the 3 pillars. And even if you're not thinking about specific external individuals, external to yourself, you still are trying to create a working environment that would make anybody happy to come there. In this case, you only have to account to yourself. So you just have to make yourself happy. So it's a little bit easier, right? You don't have to understand what makes other people happy. It's just you. But you do have to think of yourself in that situation, in this context, as the person who's coming to work and has to be happy.
Sure. And we do have one question. This is from Raymond. Do you have specific law firm examples of KPIs?
From work that I have done with law firms, the professional services are my main market. So I've worked with a number of mainly small firms, anywhere from sort of 5 to 30, teams of 5 to 30 overall. And the truth is that they change because they do depend on that vision of success. But I do see things like the customer happiness or customer experience, falling into customer experience. One that I've seen in multiple law firms is customers, or your clients understanding exactly what the process is. So that's been a big one. Different practice areas that look slightly different. It might mean something slightly different, but law is intimidating to a lot of people who are not lawyers, right? The idea of calling an attorney feels like a big commitment, and they're going to speak to me in legalese, and I don't know how much this is going to cost me, and there's this big you feel like you're jumping into a black hole for a lot of people. So that's something I've seen quite a lot in a bunch of different practice areas. So how do you know that you're doing that? And the things that I've seen firms measure might be things like very few phone calls and emails from the client, because they always know what to expect. Another one I've seen there is everything the client has to deliver arrives on time, because everything's been explained to them up front. So they know when they have to respond, when they have to send paperwork, when they have to sign something. So looking at, what can you measure? It's going to be something, of course, about performance. So exactly, it's going to be things like deadlines, volume of communication. I know firms that track questions. So when a client has a question, that goes into their CRM, right? They track the communication. So they can then extract and say, well, this was tagged as a I don't understand type question. So what are they doing to minimize those types of queries? So that's an example of how you go from what a description of success is to specifically what can I measure. And as I say, that's a common one with law firms.
So I have one final question if nobody else has questions. When I think of KPIs, I always kind of think about starting with a revenue goal, right? And I think everything we've kind of talked about under the 3 pillars, or, it's been more of that value, right? What is the value? We're kind of moving away from mean, it is about numbers, but we haven't really talked about revenue as being kind of the driving goal. But ultimately, the goal is to be profitable, to make money, and to have a cash positive, net positive practice. So how do you kind of reconcile those two goals? I guess they're not different goals, but
right. And again, it goes back to this why. And I know that the whole, ask why 5 times is not as easy as it sounds, right? Because it's hard to answer the question why. So in this case, specifically with the revenue goal is, what are you doing with that money? I actually worked with a solo attorney who really struggled with this because all the training he had ever received told him that he had to have a revenue goal and it should be ambitious. And so he set this ambitious revenue goal. And then he said, I just don't know what to do with that money. Like, I might achieve it this year and I don't know why. And so nobody wants less. He wasn't saying like, I want to lower my revenue goal, but he didn't know why he was doing it. It felt arbitrary. So it was really difficult for him to feel, I don't think he felt in control of his firm. Like somebody else had told him that should be his KPI or his measurement. And so he's like, I guess if I meet that target, I've got a good business. But there were so many other things. And, so that conversation of, well, what is everything else that makes you proud, that makes you happy? And how does that go into it? So revenue, of course, you want to track, you have to do it anyway, because you have to report, right? So you're tracking your revenue. And that can tell you what happened yesterday. But how do you use that to tell you what you want to happen tomorrow? So with revenue, it's, you have to give yourself a reason. Is it you're paying yourself this salary? Do you want to raise that next year? Give yourself a bonus? And also why? Is it do you want the bonus because you want to, if you achieve these goals, you're going to take that holiday? Is it more about year-on-year growth that tells you that you're doing the right things? Is it because you want to hire or somehow invest in your business? And so you need to, have the money aside to do that. So, again, the revenue goal, just don't make it arbitrary. Tell yourself, why does it matter to you? What story does that tell you of success, of gradual growth or changes to your business? What can you say when you see that revenue goal and say, well, this is what I've achieved? And I do see, sorry, I just pulled up the chat and there's a lovely question from Raymond about how today's presentation fits in with my KPIs. And I think that's what you're asking about mine myself. And I will just say this. I don't speak, I workshop. And so to me, every time I get an opportunity to do something like this is me getting to put my knowledge base, which is my product, into practice in a broader setting instead of one-on-one with a client, with a group of all of you. So that's how this ties into my vision of success. Is it's important for me to be here and hear questions live that I can't anticipate. And if I need to know how to answer those. So for me, it's part of professional development as well as sharing examples with all of you. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I concur with Raymond. Excellent presentation, and we thank you, truly for making us think and just think about this stuff a little differently than I think maybe some of us are used to. I know I certainly did. We do have a raffle, real quick. Rebecca is the author of a wonderful book called. Well, Rebecca, do you want to introduce it? There it is, that we are giving away an autographed copy. And our winner is Sharina Garcia. Congratulations, Sharina.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So if you will email one of us your address, we will get that book shipped to you.
Thank you.
Sounds great. And I'm going to turn it over to Prati. She's going to give us a quick update on some upcoming events. But other than that, I just want to really thank you guys. Thank you for your participation. This is, we are able to do these presentations because of you guys and your participation. So I really do appreciate it, you guys being here. And we'll get you out with that. And thanks again to Rebecca for her time and her expertise. And Prati, go ahead.
Thank you all so much. Rebecca, thank you for your excellent presentation. And Neely and Sheetal, thank you for putting together another awesome Lunch and Learn series for the Solo Small Firm Committee. I won't take too much of your time. I just wanted to say some upcoming events that we have. This Thursday, we have Bill It or It Didn't Happen with Raymond Tran and Amy Chang for new lawyers and law students. So if you or your mentees want to come listen to, I guess, The Art of Billing, don't miss that. And if you registered, even if you can't make it, it's at 8:30 in the morning this Thursday. You can still get a copy of the recording. And on Saturday, we have a pro bono CLE project with Georgia Appleseed. GAPABA will be volunteering with them, and it's not too late to register. So if you're interested in doing pro bono work with Georgia Appleseed and interested in that CLE credit, be sure to register at gapaba.org/events. And finally, we have a confirmed date for our Christmas party this year, which will be in person, or I should say holiday party. It will be on Thursday, December 2nd. And so mark your calendars, and registration is open for that. So be sure to go to gapaba.org/events to sign up for that. But other than that, thank you all so much for an excellent year and also for a great start to our Q4. And I look forward to seeing you at future events.
That's great. Well, hopefully you guys can take this information and have a great planning session for your 2022.